Hey guys, it's Promos and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be going over whether the ticker RVP is worth buying into now. The format of the video will start me by giving a brief introduction to the company. Then I'll go over fundamentals and technical analysis followed by insider buys and then giving my final thoughts. Before we get started, if you guys could smash that like button and click the subscribe button if you guys want to see more content like this. As a reminder, I am not a financial advisor and any conclusions I've made is purely speculative based on previous histories and should not be taken as facts. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started. So, RVP, otherwise known as Retraceable Technologies, is a healthcare equipment company that develops and manufactures safety syringes and IV catheters. They have around 135 employees and their main goal is to mitigate worldwide spreads of diseases. RVP is also a syringe supplier for the COVID vaccine with some big contracts with the US government, which I'll get into later. Some of the safety problems RVP is trying to deal with are unsafe safety products, catheters related bloodstream infections, needle stick injuries, and syringe reuse. First one I want to bring up is called the Vantage Point syringes. Basically, the needle of the syringe automatically retraces back into the syringe once the medication has been delivered, so there is a decreased risk of injury via the contaminated needle. Now, let's talk about what's been happening with them. Back in April of last year, they received a 1.4 million loan under the Small Business Administrative Payback Protection Program, meaning that they don't have to pay this back. Then around May, they were awarded around 83 million in a contract from the government for producing needles and syringes. Then in July, they obtained around a $53 million contract to expand their manufacturing capacity under the Defense Production Act. All this helps with the subsidization of RVP's production for their needle productions and therefore lowering their costs and providing an increase in profits and making them more competitive with other needle companies. Now let's talk about their financials. Quarterly, we can see that they have been growing from their sales/revenues, gross profits, and net income. Even though cash flow is negative due to one quarter, which I consider an outlier, it still managed to grow 76% afterwards and are almost back to being positive for the quarterly. Now let's look at annually. Annually, we can see that for the past 5 years, their sales and revenue has been growing consistently. As for net income, they were originally negative until 2019. Around that year, they also became positive in cash flow, which shows that the company has potential growth, in my personal opinion. Overall, their operations are becoming more efficient and inventory is converting into cash more effectively. Now, let's talk about recent insider buys. The CEO has been loading up shares for quite some time now. Whenever a CEO sells a share, there are many reasons on why that may happen, whether it may be bad or good. But when it comes to buying them, there's only usually one reason, which is they believe that the company's stock price will rise in the future. Now, let's go over the technical analysis. On the daily chart, we can see on a micro level that RVP has been consolidating around the 50 SMA line, which has been riding above it for around 3 months. Take note that there's a bunch of bottoming tails showing that sellers tried driving the stock price down, but buyers kept eating up the shares. Now, if we look at a macro level, we can see that the stock is at a strong upward trend. A stock that is in a certain motion tends to stay in that motion, meaning that it's hard for it to change its overall direction. We can also see that the RSI indicates that it's at a strong level of support. In my opinion, I would say that buying at these levels is not a bad idea. But if you want to minimize your risk, then I would wait to buy around the $11 area. Now let's take a look at the weekly chart to see if it confirms what we're seeing on the daily chart is at a real uptrend, or maybe it's at a downtrend. Who knows? Let's find out. On the weekly, we can see that it's indeed also moving at an upward trend. Based off previous history, it appears that $14 is a major level of resistance that we need to break in order to move higher. This may take some time, but what I like about this is that this stock gives you multiple opportunities to load on a dip, which I've been doing for a while now. As of making this video, my price target will be around $20 and my average position size is around $11.58. Now, even though I am bullish on the stock, there are some things people should consider as a risk if they decide to buy into the stock. For instance, These syringes cost around 10 times more than the typical syringe, and some investors might worry that healthcare delivery would rather not pay that much unless there was a shortage of regular syringes. Some can argue that based on the vast number of patients, it might not be as cost effective to purchase syringes, and that employers could focus on training to mitigate the risk of needle stick injuries. At the end of the day, people might think that RVP syringes may be useful but not a necessity. Even though I believe that people are going to require these syringes despite the extra costs involved, it would be premature of me to automatically assume that this was an easy buy without considering both sides in terms of some of the risk associated with the stock. Overall, I think that the demand for needles will go up, and not just because of COVID. More people have been getting flu shots lately, and I think that will be a key aspect in facilitating the drive in sales with RVP. I'm also predicting that RVP will likely sell needles to other countries in addition with the vaccine. Remember that syringes need to administer 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine and that there are around 300 million Americans in the world. This would mean that we would need an approximation of around 800 million syringes, meaning that this has tremendous opportunity. To sum things up, I believe that RVP is far from done and it should be hitting around the $20 in the future. Until that happens, like I mentioned earlier, I think I will continue to load up on the stock. Considering that this has a low float, any sort of volume could send this moving. However, be mindful that any sort of selling volume could also send this moving down, which doesn't really bother me because I just see it as a buy dip opportunity. But for those who might be newer, this might be a concern if you're not used to this kind of stuff. As always, make sure to have your own plan whenever jumping into any stock. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, then feel free to comment below. If you want more information on RVP, then definitely check out some of the links I've left below. Anyways, take care and see you guys later.